The Office of the Governor of Texas. Here you can see the government structure of Texas and how Texas has several executive offices that are elected by the people of Texas in statewide elections. The governor, the attorney general, the controller of public accounts, the commissioner of the general land office, the commissioner of agriculture, the 3 members of the Texas Railroad Commission, and the several members of the State Board of Education are all elected separately by the people of the state. One position in the executive branch, the Secretary of State, is appointed by the governor. This is the current governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. He's the 48th governor of Texas. The qualifications for governor are the following. You have to be at least 30 years old, a citizen of the United States, and a resident of Texas for 5 years preceding the election. The governor's salary is $150,000 a year, which is above average for state governors. Texas also provides the governor with a home, an automobile, an airplane, and travel reimbursement. When the governor leaves the state, the lieutenant governor becomes the acting governor and performs all the functions of the office. For example, when George W. Bush campaigned for president outside the state, Rick Perry served as acting governor. When Rick Perry campaigned for president outside the state in 2012, David Dewhurst was the acting governor. The order of succession, if the office of governor is vacated, is the following. Next in line is the lieutenant governor, and then the president pro tempore of the Senate, who is usually the most senior member of the Senate. Then the Speaker of the House, and last, the Attorney General. The governor has the authority to make appointments, and this is one of the powers given to the governor by the state constitution. Most appointments are state officials and members of state boards, commissions, and councils. They carry out the laws and direct the policies of state government activities. Members of task forces that advise the governor or executive agencies on specific issues and policies are also appointed. And also state elected and judicial offices when vacancies occur by resignation or death of the office holder. About 3,000 positions on 302 state boards and commissions are appointed by the governor. During a 4-year term, the governor will make about 1,500 appointments. One small limitation on the governor's appointment powers is something called senatorial courtesy. This means the governor is expected to clear his or her appointments with the state senator from the appointee's home district. If the senator disapproves of the appointment, the Senate might not confirm the appointment if the governor goes ahead and makes it anyway. The Texas governor's power to remove appointees is very weak. In 1981, a constitutional amendment allowed governors, with a 2/3 vote of the Senate, to remove anyone that they personally had appointed. But they are not allowed to remove any of their predecessors' appointees. And so far, no one has been formally removed from office by this procedure. The Texas governor has a line item veto that gives him or her great influence over the budgetary process. The legislature determines what a line item is. It can be a department or even an entire agency. In 2015, Governor Abbott line item vetoed over $277 million in spending. The legislature can override a veto with a 2/3 majority, but this is practically impossible because appropriations bills usually pass in the last days of a session, and the legislature has usually adjourned before the governor vetoes items. Governors use the threat of a veto to discipline the legislature and to gain support for items that the governor wants. Very few of the governor's vetoes, general vetoes or line item vetoes, are overridden by the legislature, and none have been since 1979. The governor does not have a pocket veto like the President of the United States has. If the governor does not sign a bill in 10 days, or 20 if the legislature is adjourned, or veto it, it automatically becomes law. Governor Abbott vetoed 21 bills in 2021. Some of the bills Governor Abbott vetoed in 2021 included the following. SB 1109, related to requiring public schools to provide instruction and materials and adopt policies relating to the prevention of child abuse, family violence, and dating violence. SB 474, related to the unlawful restraint of a dog, creating a criminal offense. And SB 1 was a general appropriations bill, and Governor Abbott used his line item veto power for that. This is an example of one of Governor Abbott's vetoes from 2021. It's Senate Bill 1109, relating to requiring public schools to provide instruction and materials and adopt policies relating to the prevention of child abuse, family violence, and dating violence. On the right, you see the governor's proclamation where he explains why he used the veto. He says, since Senate Bill 1109 would require every school district to provide instruction to middle school and high school students regarding the prevention of child abuse, family violence, and dating violence. These are important subjects, and I respect the Senate author's good intentions. But the bill fails to recognize the right of parents to opt their children out of the instruction. I have vetoed similar legislation before on this ground, because we must safeguard parental rights regarding this type of instruction. I look forward to working with the legislature on a narrower approach. SB 474, relating to the unlawful restraint of a dog, creating a criminal offense. Governor Abbott vetoed this as well. On the right, he explains his reasons why. He says, Texans love their dogs, so it is no surprise that our statutes already protect them by outlawing true animal cruelty. Yet Senate Bill 474 would compel every dog owner, on pain of criminal penalties, to monitor things like the tailoring of the dog's collar, the time the dog spends in the bed of a truck, and the ratio of tether to dog length, as measured from the tip of the nose to the base of the tail. Texas is no place for this kind of micromanaging and over-criminalization. Governor Abbott also used the line item veto to veto part of Senate Bill 1. And here he explains what exactly he's vetoing and why. Notice he crosses out the part of the budget, this is Senate Bill 1, the budget for 2021. He crosses out Article 10, which is the funding for the legislature, both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Why does he do this? Governor Abbott explains in the part that's italicized on the right. Texans don't run from a legislative fight, and they don't walk away from unfinished business. Funding should not be provided for those who quit their job early, leave their state with unfinished business, and exposing taxpayers to higher costs for an additional legislative session. I therefore object to and disapprove of these appropriations. Now, reading between the lines, and if you know the history of the 2021 Texas legislature, the reason he says he's doing this is because the legislature failed to pass voting reforms that he had called for in 2021. In fact, Democrats in the state legislature had twice fled the state, hoping to prevent the passage of that voting bill. In retaliation, he cut funding for the legislature, essentially cutting their salaries, and was using this as a tool to make them come back in a special session and finish the voting rights bill. This newspaper article from July 2, 2021 is about Governor Abbott's veto of SB 1. So Governor Greg Abbott vetoed funding for the legislative branch of Texas and said he was taking this drastic action as retribution after more than 30 Democrats walked out of the regular session, killing a voting bill. The legislative branch budget, known as Article 10, includes funding for House and Senate lawmakers, their staffers, and those working in nonpartisan legislative agencies. In total, this was more than $410 million allocated for the 2022-2023 fiscal budget. Governor Abbott would have affected the two-year budget. Abbott's veto would have affected the next two-year budgeting cycle starting on September the 1st. As you can see in this later article, September 17, 2021, after the Texas legislature came back in a special session and finished the voting rights bill that Abbott was so insistent upon, he signed extra legislation restoring the funding for the Texas legislature. The governor has limited powers to grant pardons, executive clemency, and parole. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles recommends action that the governor can take. Without a recommendation from the board, the governor can only grant one 30-day stay of execution for any condemned prisoner. The governor has informal powers and roles. The governor is a chief legislator for the state. There's an expectation that the governor has an active agenda of legislation to recommend to the legislature, and that he works to pass that agenda. He is also the party chief. There is an expectation that the governor will be the head of his or her political party. There are ceremonial duties, such as representing the state in speeches, presentations, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. And the governor is a crisis manager. This means there is an expectation that the governor will provide strong leadership in times of a natural or human-made disaster. Last, the governor is an intergovernmental coordinator. And here the expectation is that a governor works smoothly with other state governments. Last, I want to discuss briefly some notable Texas governors. Maybe the most famous and possibly important politician in Texas history is Sam Houston, and he was the governor of the state from 1859 to 1861. What's really interesting and memorable about his time as governor is that it ended when he opposed secession from the United States. He was removed from office on March 16, 1861, when he refused to take the oath of loyalty to the Confederate States of America. Before serving as governor, Houston had served 2 terms as president of the Republic of Texas and 1 term as a U.S. Senator from Texas. Another notable Texas governor was Jim Ferguson, nicknamed Pa Ferguson. Some of the interesting facts of his time as governor. He was responsible for a policy of state aid to rural schools. It was enacted in his time as governor. Also, a compulsory attendance law was passed. The state highway department was created. But Ferguson had a quarrel with the University of Texas that led to his impeachment and removal from office. When the UT Board of Regents refused to remove certain faculty members whom the governor found objectionable, Ferguson vetoed practically the entire appropriation for the university. In 1917, he was indicted on 9 charges by a Travis County grand jury. 7 charges of misapplication of public funds, 1 of embezzlement, and of the diversion of a special fund. The Texas House voted for 21 articles of impeachment, and the Texas Senate convicted Ferguson of 10 charges, 5 of misapplication of funds, 3 related to his quarrel with the university, 1 that he had failed properly to respect and enforce the banking laws of the state, and 1 charge that he had received $156,500 in currency from a source that he refused to reveal. He was convicted and removed from office by a vote of 25-3 in the state Senate. The next notable governor is Miriam, nicknamed Ma Ferguson, who was Jim Ferguson's wife. She was the first woman governor of Texas and the second female governor in U.S. history. In her campaign, she assured Texans that if elected, she would follow the advice of her husband and that Texas would get 2 governors for the price of 1. Her campaign promised extensive cuts in state appropriations, condemned the Ku Klux Klan, and opposed passing new liquor legislation. As a governor, she fulfilled her campaign promise to secure an anti-mask law against the Klan. Ma Ferguson pardoned an average of 100 convicts a month, and she and Pa Ferguson were accused by critics of accepting bribes of land and cash payments in return for some of those pardons. Critics also charged that the Ferguson-appointed State Highway Commission granted road contracts to Ferguson friends and political supporters in return for lucrative kickbacks. An effort to impeach Ferguson failed, but these controversies helped elect Attorney General Daniel James Moody, replacing her for the governorship. Ann Richards was another notable Texas governor. She was the second and last woman governor of Texas. One of her accomplishments was reforms of the Texas prison system, such as establishing a substance abuse program for inmates, reducing the number of violent offenders released, and increasing prison space to deal with a growing prison population. She also signed into law a requirement that applicants for motor vehicle registration renewal have a valid auto insurance policy, as well as for the initial registration of a new purchased vehicle. They had to have an auto insurance policy for that as well, and for safety inspection stickers, driver's licenses, and license plates. The Texas Lottery was instituted during her term of office, and a public school finance reform, the so-called Robin Hood Plan, was launched to make wealthier school districts remit property taxes to the state for redistribution to poorer school districts. Last, she vetoed a concealed carry bill that would have permitted licensed citizens to carry firearms for self-defense inside public establishments without the owner's permission. Another notable Texas governor was George W. Bush. In 1994, he defeated Ann Richards, a popular Democrat, who was easily considered the favorite in that election. In 1998, he won re-election with 69% of the vote, including 49% of the Latino vote and 27% of the African American vote. He was the first governor to be re-elected in Texas since the 1970s. He resigned as governor after being elected the 43rd President of the United States. During his time as governor, Bush successfully sponsored legislation for tort reform, increased education funding, set higher standards for schools, and reformed the criminal justice system. Bush helped make Texas the leading producer of wind-powered electricity in the United States. He pioneered faith-based welfare programs by extending government funding and support for religious organizations, providing social services such as education, alcohol, and drug abuse prevention, and the reduction of domestic violence. Bush used a budget surplus to push through a $2 billion tax cut plan, which was the largest in Texas history. More controversially, under his leadership, Texas executed 154 prisoners, more than any previous governor in modern American history. Rick Perry had the longest tenure of any Texas governor. He campaigned on tax reform and job growth, and opposed creating a state income tax and increasing sales tax rates. In office, Perry signed legislation that created the Texas Enterprise Fund to enhance the development of the Texas economy. The fund has given $435 million in grants to businesses since 2003. The Texas Emerging Technology Fund has given nearly $200 million to businesses since 2005. Governor Perry was pro-life. In 2003, he signed the Prenatal Protection Act, which explicitly included fetuses in its definition of human life. In 2005, he signed a bill that limited late-term abortions and required girls under the age of 18 who procure abortions to notify their parents. In 2011, Perry signed a mandatory ultrasound bill, which stipulates that prior to every abortion, the abortion practitioner or a certified sonographer must perform a sonogram before any sedative or anesthesia is administered. Before every abortion, the abortion practitioner must explain the sonogram images of the unborn child. Also in 2011, Perry signed a bill that prohibited taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. The current governor of Texas is Greg Abbott. He is the first governor of Texas to use a wheelchair. As governor, Abbott has promoted a conservative agenda, including measures against abortion, such as the Texas Heartbeat Act, more lenient gun laws and fewer restrictions, opposition to illegal immigration, and support for law enforcement funding and election reforms. Abbott's approach to handling the COVID-19 pandemic has been controversial, as he has opposed implementing face mask and vaccine mandates while blocking local governments, businesses, and other organizations from implementing their own.